Welcome everybody to UFO Man Live. My name is Tim or UFO Man, and to my side is my co-host Matt Moniz. Matt,
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me on again.
tonight we have a special segment with a gentleman from the United Kingdom by the name of Philip Kinsella. He is an author, a ufologist, alien abduction experiencer, and a clairvoyant. So it's sure to be a very interesting interview. Matt, can you explain the circumstances we had to follow concerning the interview?
Well, unfortunately, he lives in the UK or England or what have you. So it wound up being that we had to accommodate for time differences. So we had to do it as a pre-recording. But hopefully, everybody should be able to still enjoy the interview that we did, and we'll be here to answer questions in the chat room.
Yes, we'll try to answer whatever questions you have in the chat room, and we will also be back on screen after the interview. So here we go. Okay, my name is Tim or UFO Man, and to my side is my co-host Matt Moniz. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
And we have a special guest tonight. His name is Philip Kinsella. You're from England, correct?
That's correct, in the UK, Bedfordshire in the United Kingdom.
Okay. And he has a wonderful tale to tell and some stories about alien abduction or being an experiencer and consciousness. I listed him as an author, and he is very prolific as an author. I've gone through all his books. I've seen them all. He has a lot of books. You need to check him out on Amazon under Philip Kinsella. It's a very important thing that you must do. Yes. In regards to tonight's talk, we're going to be talking about several different things. So let's start with my first question for you, Philip, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, originally from Oxford. We then moved to South Africa for about 18 months when I was young, and then we came back to England. I wanted to be a writer of fiction, children's books and science fiction. And I never would have dreamt that, through an experience I had in the winter of 1989 in the village of Master Mortain, which people call an abduction, that I would now be sitting here talking to you wonderful guys and researching elements of the paranormal and the UFO field of investigations, or now UAP investigations, the same thing in my eyes. So this is primarily a little bit about me. And my main thing that I've always wanted was the truth of what we're dealing with. And even to this day, we are still finding it very difficult to ascertain exactly what it is that we're dealing with when addressing the nature of UFO reality.
Right, I agree. We're trying to stick to the truth and find a little bit more transparency in what they're talking about. Matt, do you have a question for Philip?
Yes. In your course of studies, what do you find being the most common trait in what people call abductees or experiencers?
A very good question, Matt. One of the common traits I found or discovered with regards to the abduction phenomena, and of course we have to be very careful when addressing this because people have their own ideas about what they believe is going on. One of the main areas of the abduction that fascinated me was the way that the process seemed to mirror what we call the near-death experience. And this is something which interested me because on a purely investigative level, back in 1996, I was rewarded with some kind of call it revelation or maybe a light bulb moment, where this theory, yes, and it was about the process of abduction, and most notably the greys that I have been researching. And by all accounts, I am no expert. We only have theories and models to work with. But one of the areas that interested me is, with regards to UFOs, is that there seems to be two elements, two parts to this phenomena. One is not only the observation of a UFO, and when a UFO observed, it comes into close proximity. It seems to distort space, sometimes time, but most certainly space, in the sense that, there's no one else around. And it feels like time has stopped, the atmosphere changes. And then when there is a process of abduction, this appears to occur on a very personal, integrated level of psychic connection. Very personal indeed, where, in that moment, most people are taken through walls and doors. They lose time. The beings communicate through telepathy. And what invariably has affected what I would call possibly the real essence of you, the astral body, that's been temporarily separated from its physical housing to bring you in line with their matrix, so to speak. Looking at the near-death experience tells us much of the same thing occurs. When someone dies, they report floating away from their body. They go down a tunnel, in more times than not, see a light. They communicate with light beings or with loved ones. And if the physical body is in any way compromised through, major illness, a lot of occasions it's reported that when the soul of that person returns after the NDE experience, that they are healed. So looking at the abduction phenomena, it occurs to me that perhaps this is something being forcibly initiated by, let's just take the greys as an example, whereas an NDE is a normal processing of separation. Now, I always used to assume that an abduction happened on a very physical level of integration. The experience that I had back in the winter of 1989 was part physical, was part non-physical, but I still had physical marks after the experience. That really astounded me. And when I started to research it and trying to put the pieces together, it seems to me that whatever force or intelligence that we're dealing with seems to operate through my mind as some kind of interdimensional or perhaps hyperdimensional, reality. And this is where I'm not saying that this is what I believe. It's where I'm saying that it's a possibility that this phenomena is operating on higher levels of intelligence and dimensions of awareness.
Consciousness.
Correct. Absolutely.
Scientists have, other than that, have actually suggested that this is the case, that there are hyperdimensions and different realities that we may not be aware of, actually, because we're not in tune with our consciousness as much as we should be.
Correct.
And if we grow in our consciousness, we'll maybe get a chance to commune with these beings more than we do now. So I agree.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. And if we take our model one step further, one of the key components to the research that fascinated me was the greys themselves. Now, I know that there are reports of other beings, and my argument has been, where are the aliens? Where are they? We do have physical evidence to a degree through film, through radar tracking of these objects that are called UAPs that's coming in and out very quickly. That is absolutely, totally, 100% a reality. They are here with us.
Physically affected items.
Absolutely, yeah. Physically affected items as well. Absolutely. So we are dealing with a reality, but the frustrating part to this reality is that it's like chasing ghosts. They elude us, and I believe that perhaps it's possible that they have to bring themselves down to our level of reality, and perhaps on a temporary basis before they have to go out very quickly again. It's the same with us having to survive in a deep sea diving suit when we go into the ocean, and an environment that is inhospitable to humans. The same with space. When you have astronauts that go into space, another curious factor that occurs is that the astronauts have reported that they feel very different when they come back. So, I always maintain the fact that it's possible that we're dealing with some type of, for argument's sake, interdimensional intelligence that is coming in and going out. But the other component to this as well that's interesting is that why is it that the Greys, for instance, do not want to connect with us on a physical level, or a process of continuing some kind of communication or relationship with us? It's always done largely through deceit, and a lot of the times through some kind of covert operation of their own. And my other curiosity, with regards to this is regarding the cloning, the issue, which I agree with. And I thought, well, why would a species such as the Greys, who let's just for argument's sake assume that they're clones, why would a clone species that cannot themselves replicate be interested in a species that can? Because we hear of these, hybridization programs, and this is coming not just from researchers below ground, but also professors and notable scientists. And that was kind of curious to me. Now, through my experience, I didn't see any hybrids. I did see a Grey, and I did see some other beings. And I thought, well, my goodness me, look at me now. I'm a researcher like yourselves, and Matt is a scientist. And now, how are people going to accept the fact that I claim to have had an experience and now coming forward to write about it? So it didn't do me any favors in the long run, because when I was looking for the truth, and, as you good gentlemen do your research, you've always got that in the back of your mind, and people will say, well, you've been abducted, you've had this experience. Are you being biased in any way? And my answer to that is no. I'm not going to be biased. I'm going to be honest and straight to the point. People back in the day were claiming, or it was known, that they were having experiences and abductions, and I thought occurred on a very physical level. But as the years roll by, and when I stood by my guns, we find that that's not very much the case. I mean, we have physical evidence, of course, but the key question is, where are the aliens? Where are they hanging out? And of course, this also led into areas of consciousness, of how our brains worked, what mind was, consciousness, how we came into being. And of course, the more you start to dig, as you gentlemen know, the deeper you go into the rabbit hole. It's like there doesn't seem to be any transparency, and you've got to filter through all of the mumbo jumbo and the disinformation and the lies and all the rest of it. And when you strip that aside, we're still left with a fascinating part to this puzzle, which is it continuously eludes us.
Right, I agree. What do you think, Matt?
I would agree with most of it. Now, my own personal experiences have been absolutely physical in this plane, in this form of existence. What's kind of unique about my case is I was introduced to other people on board, and then we met up later, and we've had other witnesses witness us be physically taken, removed, and physically brought back. Now, the hard part about this is there's also been other cases where it's been they yank the consciousness.
Correct.
Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's column A, sometimes it's column B. There's plenty of cases for both. Now, getting to the cloning, that's something I can talk about because I do cloning for a living in part of what I do. I genetically engineer microorganisms to produce various things. I also work in analytical chemistry, testing the materials once they're done. What they're doing is, because they come from a different biosphere, their genetics are different and tuned for where they came from. They are looking to take the genetic materials from this biosphere and blend them together so that they can create a homeostatic type of being that can transcend be able to involve themselves in both biospheres. May not be able to necessarily live in both of them permanently, but can operate in both in temporary form.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you because, thinking about this is incredible. If they have come from an older universe, because we understand that this universe maybe is a very young universe and, is an expansion of or a process of a part of an older universe, that these beings have come from this older universe and discovered this life form. And I always had this idea in my head also, Matt and Tim, that the Greys themselves were adapting some new life form, some new creation that is able perhaps to explore another universe. We have to take this into account. At the end of the day, I am open to all forms, trust me, of speculation. I will never, ever put myself in a corridor and lock myself in and say, no, this is what I believe, because I think we have to look at a number of theoretical models with regards to extraterrestrial intelligence, whatever you may call them. And I think that makes absolute sense, Matt, what you're saying, because obviously they're interested in adapting or creating a new genus. Obviously, here on Earth, in going back into ancient or antediluvian times, tells us surely that we ourselves may have been the product of some type of extraterrestrial intervention. And I absolutely believe that, because I believe that more than the Sunday school version that we've been sold by the system that's programmed each and every one of us. And as soon as you mention this, that famous word comes up, the psychological weapon conspiracy theorist. Well, I mean, most people don't buy that anymore, because a conspiracy is just used as a psychological weapon to turn the finger of doubt upon the opposing mind or the questioning mind. But I agree with you, Matt, that in terms of this cloning process, that much is absolutely evident. That the other idea I had, or a romanticized idea, as it were, is that the Greys themselves had somehow counseled themselves out of the process of creation through the art of replication. If we take ourselves, for instance, as a life form that breeds, produces, my understanding is that we evolved obviously from some form of intelligence. We come from somewhere else. I don't believe that we live and die. I believe that the consciousness, or people call the soul, comes from that realm and ingests into this form. And then we create memories through this life, and then we die. And these reports of people returning to the other side and communicating with their loved ones that they knew on this side as they knew them. What happens to the essence of that consciousness or the soul when it gets into the core unit of the experience, we don't know. But we do know that there is survival. Now, because we are reproducing constantly and creating these memories, is it possible that the Greys themselves, through cloning, have counseled themselves out, that can no longer replicate or create themselves with memories, and they're looking for something that can fill in the spaces, so to speak? Now, my thesis or theoretical idea, and it is just a theory, was a component of the physical and non-physical, because the way I see it is that there are two elements to us. Indeed, I think with all life forms, there is energy and intelligence. And I think that for these beings, fascinating as they are, I all open and aware also of the hyperdimensional hypothesis or older universes, most definitely. But they're after something, and I think and feel that our understanding of that is still flawed, because the Greys seem to lie to us. They lie. I didn't have any real dialogue with the Grey that was with me. It was more instructions to get up and follow it and to get off where I was. And there was another interesting part to the experience I had, where there was a fully clothed Grey that was very different from the others. I seem to recognize this Grey. I can't remember where, but it was not a pleasant experience, I can assure you. But one of the researchers here in England, Pierre Sabac, he's drawn parallels to that abduction, or a part of the abduction, from the physical to the non-physical elements, and made a key connection between that. I'm not going to go into detail because it's too long-winded, but I was able to remember the experience, whereas most people that have what they call an abduction don't. and I know that I'm a hard nut to crack when it comes to regression or hypnosis. So whether or not I was allowed to remember or recall it, I don't know. It doesn't make me special. In fact, I've got more questions than answers with regards to it. But that is an interesting hypothesis, Matt, and one that, as you as a scientist would know in terms of your research, and I agree with you most definitely, and I have thought about that. That has entered my mind about them wanting to create a new genus because maybe to help themselves or to create a new life form to enter another universe. Who knows? Or to know that we as a species are finished, that we're on the end of a destruction. I hope not. And I'm not, pushing out bad news there. But if that's the case, then they would be creating a new species that was adapted for another world somewhere else far from here. Who knows?
Created as an intermediary. They can't necessarily exist here as a full-time type of thing. This is we'll call it an intergalactic intercom. I can contact my clone, my mutated clone, to contact these people that as an intermediary.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting that you said that in your experiences, that they didn't give you much in terms of communication. I wind up with the same thing. I've only had one direct sentence to a question or a statement that I had made. And, I'm one of these non-willing participants. I don't play well with others type of thing. And I'm the tiger that they have to basically, sedate while they do the work. And one of the things I used to do when I was younger is I kept telling them, you don't exist. I don't believe in you. You aren't real. And I remember this because it's giving me chills right now. One of them turned to me in an audible voice in my head. It said to me, it doesn't matter if you believe we exist. It matters that we believe you exist.
Oh, good Lord. Wow.
So at that point, I'm like,
wow, that is strong stuff. Yeah. Do you know, I also understand that, that when we're dealing with elements of the UFO, now UAP phenomena, is that it also brings into question us as human beings because, even as a kid, the concept of death scared the hell out of me. I remembered saying to my mother, where was I before I was? And she said, in my tummy. But my mother is very understanding and very open to all these subject matters that we are discussing here today. And most of my family are as well, thankfully. But back in the day, in the 80s, when I was a kid growing up, you daren't talk about UFOs, you daren't talk about life after death. But I was obsessed with this whole concept, and it was only when a grandfather had passed suddenly with a heart attack on the paternal side, my paternal grandfather, that I was truly shocked. And I remembered no one spoke about it. Now, when people say, Philip Kinsella claims that he's a medium, I claim nothing, but I was more interested in the application of consciousness and whether or not there was any truth to the claims that it survived that state called death. And I discovered that it did. And most definitely. So I had these UFO experiences. One of them was abduction back in 1989, and many of them had been close-range sightings. And I will tell you now, the last of which had thankfully been filmed by my niece on the 9th of April 2016 at precisely 11:15 p.m. at night, because when my brother and I were coming back from some police friends from an early birthday meal, I drove, my brother, my niece and my sister drove forward ahead of us. And we were presented over our house with these 3 huge, massive circular lights in the shape of a triangle. They were separate. They weren't a triangle craft. They were separate because one of them moved independently of the others. And what happened was that we discovered just recently that these objects have been tracked from the Isles of Scilly coming up. And, this is something that was incredible. And when we viewed the crafts, when we got out of our car, they had descended. They were very low. There was no noise. There was no one walking their dog down. I mean, we lived down a relatively quiet street, but people are walking their dog back from the pub or driving down the road. There was absolutely no one around. And when my brother and I were so excited, that when I spoke and he spoke, it sounded like it had just snowed, that the objects were somehow distorting the space around us. Now, there was no time, we weren't abducted, but I made a full report immediately on these objects, and I can assure you that when people say to you, oh, you know, you saw Chinese lanterns, let me make this quite clear. These objects were massive and they were low. And when you are in their presence, there's a part of you that tells you they are not from here. And you know, we had a helicopter come over our house. It wasn't a military helicopter or a police helicopter. It was a white helicopter that came on the 10th of April. I didn't clock the time that it arrived, but I knew that it was a lot earlier, that circled our house 3 times, making such a racket that when we went outside, we could see the 2 pilots in front. They positioned the helicopter and tilted it so that we could see them as they went round the house 3 times and went off. Conspiracy? No, but there could be a darker reason that, you know, if anyone should mention, oh, you know, did you see those UFOs on the, you know, oh, you mean the helicopter? And of course, you'll be surprised how people, and that was the next day, but most people will forget and say, oh, yes, you know. So I think that, you know, this always comes when UFOs are seen. And Matt, you probably know this, and Tim as well, that when they come in, there is always this distortion of events that occur that really are very strange. And although we're trying to look at it in a scientific level, I'm not a scientist, but my mind is open to theoretical content. But when you start to lose the threads because you're thinking, oh my goodness, how do you explain this and how do you explain that? It's very strange because we try as researchers to keep ourselves as level-headed and grounded as possible. But continuously we are eluded by other elements that seem to encompass the experience itself. And, you know, and it tells me, yes, we are dealing with interdimensional beings, or maybe beings from another galaxy, or most definitely another universe. Because we don't even know enough about ourselves or what we're contained in. And that's another area that I'm fascinated, especially quantum, you know, into the quantum realm, and in terms of creation as well. It's fascinating. But the frustrating part is, unfortunately, we are met by a media cartel. It's a lot more lenient than it has been because there's been admittance lately. But, you know, it's programmed our society. You know, it's you know, that's the way it is. It's the battle we have.
Yeah, the UAP hearing that occurred in the United States recently was a real letdown. It was almost a nothing burger in the sense of the word. We were all waiting for the 4K footage, you know, the footage that was filmed off the wingtips of the fighter jets, which we know exists. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Lou Elizondo, who's out there in the news quite a bit, and he has been in direct contact with the actual evidence. And why we didn't see it, I don't know. I almost think that the people who are in the know, that are being controlled by whoever, I always refer to them as the elite group. Or the elitists who are controlling them because of power concerns. In regards to the information that's being controlled, we all feel here in the United States, at least I do, that the lid has been slammed shut again. It really hasn't been opened. I mean, they showed us video footage from 2017. You know, everybody's seen it. And then they showed us a fast clip that you couldn't even see. So I took that clip, put it on my channel, analyzed it, blew it up, and people could see it. But it was so hazy that you couldn't identify it. Now, I want to take a step back here. You made the comment that there is some type of distortion involved when you have a close-up encounter. When I had a close-up encounter, and it was only 50 feet away and about 500 feet in the air, and it wasn't one object, it was 6 in a horizontal line, all rectangular in shape with rounded edges, and they were on fire within the confines of the objects. This was in broad daylight. Okay.
Mm.
I saw it with 12 other people. We all had cell phones, and some of us had digital cameras, and we were filming the objects. None of us got footage. We saw it through our viewfinders. We actually had it in frame. We brought it after the objects left. We brought it together so that we could check our footages. None of
Mm.
us had anything. It was all distorted. It was all grainy. So
Mm.
you are correct. We had evidence of that distortion.
Yes. Yeah. And I think also, I think another thing, sorry to interrupt, gentlemen, there's another aspect of this as well, too, because in some cases, the other really, truly bizarre part to this is that, let's say, for instance, a UFO is being witnessed by a group of people. The group of people will sometimes report seeing a completely different craft. Now, I know that people in an incident will see or experience different things, but come on, when you are seeing something which is not from here, we assume that's the case, then they're going to report more or less the same thing. But you find that some people who were present didn't see anything and other people did. So I think that it's possible that whatever force that these objects are operating on, or however they operate, may somehow distort the time space, and we use the posh word continuum, and this can alter our perception of reality. Because it's forcing its way through into our reality from its reality. And this is quite clear because a lot of UFOs, I will call them UFOs, they're the same as UAPs, it's the same thing. It's just more scientific now that they've changed it and less emphasis away from the alien hypothesis. But normally there's kind of like a distortion around the objects, which is not always in the legitimate cases, but in a large number of cases, there is some kind of distortion around the edge of the object. And this is interesting. I think this will tell us a lot more. And I agree, going back to what you said, Tim, it's almost laughable. You can't tell me that the military establishments, all those that are in the know and have been studying this phenomena for God knows how long, certainly after the Roswell conspiracy, you're not going to tell me that they haven't got super amazing film quality footage of these objects. I mean, come on, when I've seen the stuff that they released, and it's almost laughable. I'm like, is that all you've got? I mean, there's some people, the public have got better footage of UFOs than they've got.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I agree with you. Now, another part that I will say here is that myself and another good friend of mine, Nigel Ross, who created New Force here in England, the National UFO Reporting Service, he created it because he didn't want people's reporting to go missing to governmental sources. So I wrote to Parliament, which would be equivalent to your Senate here in England. And I wrote to a prominent lady, Theresa May, who was then very shortly our Prime Minister, because she had been linked with the Gary McKinnon case here in England when he was going to be extradited because he'd, as you know, he'd forcibly invade. Yes, that's right. And he'd seen something he shouldn't have seen. And of course, they love to clear it all up with we know how they clear things up at the end of the day by making out that someone's not too well. But I wrote to her asking her that we and our team of researchers here in England would like to meet up with any of you in Parliament that would like to discuss the UFO problem seriously and to bring all of our data, all of our evidence to the table and work as a group, as a united effort to get to the truth. Well, the silence ensued, and that's all I got. And these people, without detracting, these people, your senators and our politicians, are meant to be here within your great country and our country here, are meant to be here for the people. And you think that was the case, but I agree with you, Tim and Matt, that there is a conspiracy of silence. Now, when someone has a conspiracy of silence, that is quite disconcerting, because it tells us that, what is it that they don't want us to know? And please don't go down that religious route, because that's such an old tune.
Yeah.
It'll upset the already programmed balance of society. I understand that if there's a fuel crisis, it's like watching a scene from Sir David Attenborough's wildlife programs here in England when everyone goes ape. But I don't think that people will go ape if they announce to the world that extraterrestrial intelligence is real, that they are here and they've been here for some time. But how are they then going to explain how these visitors come into our sphere of reality and what they're doing?
Right.
And I think this is probably why there is this consensus of silence. But it gets even more disturbing, because you have to look at one side of the UFO phenomenon, which is positive, and another side which is negative. And
Right.
this is true on both counts. There is the positive and there is the negative. And I think it's the negative part that perhaps our establishments, or those secret establishments, have been dealing with, rather than the positive ones. Now, that's the way that I see it, in terms of the truly difficult nature of how we're going to address the problem to the nations of the world. I mean, Matt and Tim, I would love it if it was like a scene from V, Kenneth Johnson's original V, when the motherships would come over and they come down, and that, we see them, we shake their hand. I'm going to tell you, boy, I'd be first in queue there. I'll tell you, like you guys, I want to shake their hand. I'll ask them a lot of questions, but I don't think it's happening that way. And I agree with you that it's quite disturbing within its elements, I think.
Some of the things that they're concerned about here in the U.S. is the fact that they're visiting nuclear arsenals and shutting down nuclear missile sites. The thing is, that gives me the idea that they're checking our defenses, not necessarily in a positive manner, but in a sense that they want to know whether we can destroy them as well as ourselves, and maybe that's why they're trying to shut them down. But then again, there was an incident in Russia where they actually turned the nukes on. So I have no idea what their intent is. And right now, the biggest issue among congressmen in the United States, from what I understand, is that they're afraid that it's a national security threat in regards to the actions that have been taken by a few individual sightings of vehicles that are unidentified. Now, whether they are aggressive or not, we do not know. I've always professed the idea that there is a positive and negative side to everything in the universe.
Oh, yes.
And people are discounting that. I see a large group of people saying, oh, alien life, oh, they would have destroyed us already if they had wanted to. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think what the case is, they live longer than us. And they could just be biding their time. Because one of the people I interviewed said this: if you want to know if alien life has really reached out to mankind to help, in some cases with healings, yes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
But did they help us stop World War I or World War II or the Korean War or the Vietnam War? So no, they're kind of in an observational state. And what gets me is talking about alien abduction. I really have been digging into it on UFO Man channel because I find it to be a very valid phenomenon. I've had some incidences where I think I've been actually abducted, but I don't have a waking memory. So I'm in the process of lining up somebody to regress me. But like you said, you're a hard nut to crack. So am I.
Yes.
But I'm going to say this. I do believe that they're only focusing on the technology. They're not focusing on alien abduction. They're not focusing on the consciousness, awareness of the phenomenon. They're only concentrating on the basic principles of the actual nuts and bolts technology that are involved. And and I've been told over and over again by people in the know, we got to take it one step at a time. Well, they've been taking one step at a time since Project Sign. And
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Back at Project Sign, they had an estimate of the situation that said that, it's a national security threat. We know they're real. Same thing they're saying now. And
yeah, absolutely.
They're following the same playbook. And that's really frustrating for people like myself and Matt and our other co-host who's not here tonight, Tom Reed, who had a major UFO encounter in the Great Barrington area. And I know Matt is from that area as well.
Well, Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah, Massachusetts. And so it's disheartening sometimes when you don't hear the information coming out because these people have it.
Yes, that's right. And I think that they harbor those secrets, and they're just drip feeding us with nonsense. I mean, if we go back to 1947, I believe that a craft of unknown origin crashed in Roswell. And even, it doesn't take a scientist, no disrespect to you, Matt, being a very clever man, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that the conspiracy started there. I mean, if, as the army then had admitted, that their project was a secret weather balloon, a mogul weather balloon. It was that secret, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't even know they'd lost it. And at the end of the day, what does that tell you in terms of secrecy? What's interesting is that with a slight stance to this in terms of our extraterrestrial buddies, is that their craft seem to come down in remote areas. My brother, because I have an identical twin brother also who is very interested in the phenomena, believes that these are Trojan horses, that they're gifts that's sent, and they have to be sent separately and slightly different from the original models of what's been sent, i.e. Roswell and Aztec, on the other crashes around the world, to not raise suspicion. And it's interesting, isn't it, if we use that conspiracy theory and take it one step further, that there is something that wants us to evolve on a much faster level of technological advancement. And certainly since the 80s, you gentlemen all know, I'm not saying you're old, but you would have been there with me through the 80s and seeing how radically things have changed with regards to technology. I mean, it's just like, we've become, from Stonehenge into a remarkable technological age in such a short space of time with regards to our journey through, the epochs of time, as it were, going back. It seems very strange. And now people are talking about this transhumanism. And, what's interesting is that if we look at it, maybe these elite members that know more than we do are trying to turn us into something that it wants. The Greys come across as, very cloney. They don't seem to have any empathy or understanding of love or of taste to smell. They seem to have lost those attributes, if indeed they've lost them or they yearn for them, especially regarding reproduction and the process of ingestion and that type of thing, and incubation. And I don't know, because the way I see it is the system, people say, that they're in touch with them. Well, I'd like to meet these aliens and be in touch with them myself, because everything is always hidden. We're only drip fed, this or that. We're not given anything that's substantial. And in technology, we're only given the toys. I think that perhaps that the secret military industrial complex probably have their hands on some amazing magic. And I know that this has made its rounds, and that we, the public, the docile public, who are merely the ATM machines for the system that we serve, are just given the trinkets, the toys. But it's interesting, I think, with you, Matt and Tim and myself and many others, that there seems to be a process of awakening on a conscious level. And I think this is something the system we serve misses greatly. I think because of our inherent spiritual nature, and I use the word spiritual very loosely, when I use the word spiritual, I mean our conscious survival beyond this realm, our transmutation beyond this physical level of reality, might remind us and serve us that perhaps what we're dealing with is something that we're all connected with anyway. There is that to consider as a hypothesis if we take into consideration the process of reincarnation. I give a simple example of your mobile phone network system. It's a wonderful example to use. You've got the physical hardware, but that is not the phone. The phone actually is the signaling that comes into it. And the signals are information that you can't see that's operating on a higher level of awareness. And this information is kind of unique to you to a degree, but other people can infiltrate your mechanism. So we have these signals and we have the physical object called the phone that merely translates the information from its original side to this side so that we can understand it on this side. In its primary state, we wouldn't have a clue what it's saying because we wouldn't even know it was there. Our visitors may be able to link through to us, giving in terms of consciousness in this physical or biological level, that they may be able to enter through consciousness this way. And this is why I think it's interesting to speculate about the interdimensional hypothesis. People already understand about the process of extending consciousness, through remote viewing, through astral projection, out-of-body experience, near-death experiences. It's proven continuously, even through the stimulation of drugs to release consciousness. Not that I've tried that, and I'm not going to anytime soon, but it's a fact that's there. So we understand that as a sentient beings that we are, there is a lot more to us than the meat mechanism that we're sold by the system. There's a loose version of the Bible or religion that we have to be very careful about. That it's kind of like a little comfort zone that they can fall back on, but it doesn't really tell us anything. Certainly not about Genesis, or as I said before, the Sunday school version we've been sold. When you're looking in terms of when they're talking about the Big Bang, oh, give me a break. Or it could have happened, but something can't derive from nothing. We know that. And these are elements that fascinate me. So, maybe the system knows that this intelligence is so far beyond our human understanding that they are not able to tell us that, hey, these beings actually connect through to your consciousness, that, they integrate into our reality through you. And it could be that a certain faction of these greys, or I did joke with Kathleen Marden, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. She's a dear friend. I did joke with her once and say to her that, it's like there's a group of badass greys out there, like a couple of cowboys. But it could be that they come in to consciousness and filter through to our memories, and then can alternate those memories, can actually live in your timeline before going out again. And this is another area that we are exploring. I mean, we don't want to get too off the mark, because when we're dealing with it on a methodical level, or Matt would know scientific level, we have to be very grounded with our approach. And certainly most of those problems arise when we have people that really believe they're being abducted every night of the week. I had one couple once. The guy had everything worked out. Let me tell you, he knew everything. He knew about Genesis, creation, you name it, he knew it. And his partner was being abducted every night of the week, and told me that the reason I had a negative abduction in 1989 was because I was a negative person. Well, I can assure you I'm the least negative person around. I'm practical and grounded. And, we have to be very grounded when we're dealing with our research. And this is why I think it's important to understand that, like yourselves, it's really wonderful and interesting to hear your thoughts and your ideas, which are just as important. So, what are we dealing with, and where are the aliens? Where are they? Well, it clearly tells us that they're operating on a completely different level of reality and are able to break through to our reality whenever they want. And have they got contracts with people? Is there some kind of soul connection link? Well, that is possible. We don't know. Or is it some kind of genetic connection link? I believe that most definitely. So yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about them coming from the ethers, from beyond, and from consciousness. You could, in a sense, call them Akashic avatars.
Yes, I like that. And you know, also everything that we
So,
I like that. I might nick that off you, Matt. You know,
you
but
have my permission. But
yeah, we'll have to give you.
that's what you're calling them. The Akashic record is basically the all of consciousness, and
Yes.
you know, and they are an avatar of that.
Yes.
A physical thing that manipulates and on behalf of.
Because we ourselves are in danger of becoming extinct, and that is a fact. Although we're here now, we can't comprehend that, but we are a warmongering species. Not all of us, but the species itself is no. But you know, we are not nice individuals, the large majority of them. Now, the thing is that we create from the depths of our mind. People call it imagination, as though it's a little box in your head that opens up now and again. But what we have to realize is the brain itself is a transmitter and a receiver. It opens up to certain concepts and builds upon belief systems, and it can create its own reality, its own structured reality through how it believes and centers consciousness through to this form.
Mm-hmm.
So we create from mind. We do it in a very slow way because we're on a physical level. There is no reason to suppose that extraterrestrials are of mind and are able to create instantly on their level through this process of mental projection. And, you know, this is probably why, you know, to some degree, they come in and go out very quickly. The crashes, I do believe, it could be possible that they create their reality by also extracting or harvesting the materials from our world to structure themselves into this world. We don't know. We can only assume that. But certainly one of the things that is really interesting is the elements of not just the UFO phenomena or the alien abduction hypothesis, but also of why it's happening and why the system that we serve is lying to us. And it has continuously lied. There was something on the news today, I will tell you. AOL and the internet and social media sites are a haven for these big bosses to bring down the chain of command, to tell their servants to put this out there, put that out there, let them see this. 1 minute, I want you to tell the public that UFOs are real. The next minute, I want you to wheel out a scientist and tell them all it's a load of old rubbish. The same with life after death. So what they're doing is they're continuously hampering and drip feeding and confusing the public so that they go, I've had enough. But it's only, you know, thank God for many, many brilliant researchers around the world who won't give up, who are looking. It reminds me, and I have to go back to V, Kenneth Johnson's V, the 10-hour miniseries that was done back in 1984, 83, 84. I loved it. And my brother has been in touch with Kenny Johnson. He's helped him out with a few things. He's a lovely man. He loves his fans. He's a good man, Kenny Johnson, and absolutely, I got just sing his praises. But one of the things in that V that I remembered even as a young kid growing up, I was about 14, I think, was that there was a scientist that was like yourself, Matt, we'll use you as the role model. A scientist was analyzing the photographic evidence of the visitors. And of course, he started to discover that their cranium was very different from ours and it looked more like reptilians. And of course, what happened to him in the film was that they got rid of him. But you saw a lot of researchers are digging, and I think that's the good thing to do. Don't worry, I just saw a shadow moving past you, Matt, but never mind.
Yeah, was that a helicopter sound?
Yeah, oh yes. Well, you know, I think that it's good that we analyze and we look at things. And, you know, you get some people who are adamant that it's this or they're adamant that it's that. But one of the things we can all agree on is that the phenomena itself seems to create levels of high strangeness. It's not just about the UFO or UAP and alien phenomena. It's what it also brings with it. A distortion of time, a distortion of space. There is also these elements of poltergeist activity, of other phenomena that could possibly be residue of the dimension that's been broken through by the visitors as they come through. It could be that as they come through to our space-time, that they have distorted other dimensional areas of awareness, other realities that can seep through to this reality. Because it's hard for us to envision an alien that suddenly becomes a werewolf or a big black cat, or then turns into a poltergeist, or our dead loved ones. We've got to look at what the patterns of what's going on when a UFO event occurs, and that is why a lot of investigative evidence is so essential from those true accounts of what happened afterwards. But a lot of times in UFO activity, I mean, we didn't get any poltergeist activity after the last sighting of the 3 huge spheres on the 9th of April 2016. There was no poltergeist activity, but one of the things that I did clock on my brother, most notably, was that it was just really weird. So is the presence of our visitors altering time and space, or dimensional shifts, which in turn upset the balance and allow this other residue from other dimensions to seep through? We don't know. We've got to look at it either one or the other way.
They say that's happening at Skinwalker Ranch, actually.
Exactly. I was going to mention that. Tim, yes, Tim. Matt, you were going to say something, Matt.
Yeah, it's interesting that you keep bringing up your twin brother. Okay. A question for you. Has he experienced stuff like what you've gone through?
Yes, he did. And that was an event when he was a lot younger than I was. I was 20 and he was 13. Now, we'd had an event that happened with me and my brother when we were age 13 at our maternal grandparents' house in Middlesex in Feltham. They lived in a fairly big house that had been created and made by my Uncle Bob, but they had another house by it. They were big houses. And my grandmother and me and my brother were out in the back garden one summer's day. You didn't clock down the date or time. People say, I want dates, I want times. Like that's going to change anything. As a kid, you're not bothered, But it was in the summer. It was the summer vacation, because we always spent all our holidays with them, because they were just as much parents to us as my mother was to us. And we were out in the garden with our grandmother, and this silver ball came over. We thought it was a balloon, but it was a sphere about the size of a football. It had no markings on it. It made no sound. It just came over from the sky to the garden. It was a clear blue sky, slightly windy, and it hung above our grandmother's head. And when we asked her what it was, she said, I'll never forget her words. She said, oh, look, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. But my grandmother was psychic, and the object then seemed to go towards the second floor of the house, and then up to the third floor, and then went over the house. And we ran in and watched it as it disappeared into the distance. That was the first real case of high strangeness. But in that year, 1982, because 82, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's right, 1982, my brother in the winter had this experience with doctors where we at that time had lived in Luton after coming back from South Africa in a big Victorian house in Luton, not in Middlesex, where we stayed with our grandparents, and we shared a big room. And I remember my brother telling me about it, although I don't recall anything that happened. And of course, these things happen where they switch someone off. His abduction, and the only one he can remember, was when he was being taken up to the room, to the ceiling, through the loft, and there was an object in the sky. And he found himself awaking and in a wheelchair, a modern wheelchair, in what he called an operating room. And there were some doctors, 3 of them, that were clad heavily, so he couldn't see their faces, ahead of a operating table. And there was a man behind him that spoke fluent British English, a very commanding voice. And he said to Ronald, we're going to perform an operation on you, Ronald. And when he said Ronald's name, my brother flinched, because he knew that this guy, whoever he was, knew him. And so when they'd finished what they'd done, when the doctor put a nodule on his left hand here, a kid, remembering that on the left hand at the top, this is what they do when they anesthetize you sometimes in an operating theatre. He didn't know. When he came back, he just came back, and then he felt the bump, and then he recalled the image. He said it's a goodbye kiss that they gave him, which was the holographic image of a nasty looking Cheshire cat. And he realized later on that they'd left their insurance policy with him, so that if he'd gone to a psychologist or a counselor or whoever, that they say that you've been down the rabbit hole, you've seen Alice in Wonderland. And that haunted him for many years. And that was his experience. Mine was very different in the winter of 1989 in the village of Master Mortain. Mine was more intense and disturbing, and not one that I would want repeated. I have written about it. I've gone over it 100 times and still can't make sense of it. But as I said, in my experience, the grey that I saw, the clothed grey that was dressed in a one-piece uniform, khaki uniform with knee-length boots, and he had his arms folded. He had a real nasty skull on his face. He wore a pointed hat, but he was looking at me really angrily. And I'm like, you're angry with me? I've just been up there because they brought me down, and you've done that to me. I wanted to punch him, but I couldn't move. But his actions, what he did when I asked him a question, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How could I get through solid matter? Whichever way I worded it is more or less the same thing, like how the hell am I to get through solid matter? I wanted to know, because I knew if he'd tell me, I'll be able to tell people that this is real and this is how they do it. But he looked shocked, and he just raised his head up, and he started to rasp this electronic rambling sound, froze. And of course, earlier that night, on the physical level, my brother had also stood there when things started to go a bit pear-shaped. I'm sorry it's a little bit disjointed here, but it's too long-winded to go into. But my brother also raised his head to the ceiling and said, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. And that heralded the appearance of this strange being earlier that came through solid matter. So what the being, the grey, was doing seemed to be mimicking what my brother had done earlier, where he didn't understand why he said there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die, because there was no earthquake and our paternal grandmother was very much alive at that point then. So the grey seemed to be, another researcher said, he's mimicking what your brother did, but seemed to be scrambling reality, like, gate crashing reality on some level. We couldn't get my head around it, but I missed it. And I thought, my God, yes, you're absolutely right. I didn't even think about that. So I always say to people, when you've had an experience, whatever experience you've had, please be honest. Please record it as it happened. Unless you have I haven't been regressed yet. There is someone who's a very prominent ufologist who's going to help me and my brother. There's some other memories that are locked, we think, since childhood. But please be honest and keep everything as it happened. Don't change anything. Just record it as it happened and see what occurs. But it's never changed, and it's still baffled me. I've got past that point now of people saying, well, did you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder? Well, I guess in a way I did, because, who the hell would believe me? First of all, I see this small being coming through the door when we were all present when I came home from work, when the light started to appear in the front of the house and the dog was going mad. My brother went into a trance and said those words, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. And then later on in the early hours of the morning, finding myself floating through the house and being taken up to craft, and they did what they did, and it's weird, and left with physical marks afterwards. And that's something that still goes through my head, but I have no understanding of why they did it, where they came from, what they wanted, nothing. And someone said to me once, oh, it could be a psyops operation. I said, give me a break. I said, let me tell you, why on earth would military establishment waste all their time and resources, if they had them, on a relatively unimportant individual, just to make them believe that aliens are doing it when it's military? Come on, give me a break. And also that took me into the areas of Rendlesham, how areas of high strangeness encompasses all of our lives. I remembered as a young lad reading about the release of the statement in the newspapers, national newspapers, about the military seeing aliens, or what we thought were aliens, but it turned out to be a UFO. And I've met Colonel Charles Holt, a lovely, decent man. His mind's as sharp as a knife, and had dinner with him as well too, and also Jim Peniston and other members. There are some I will not mention here because we have to remain with the truthful testimony with regards to the events that unfolded over those 3-night period in 1980 at the Bentwaters base. But years later, I then, when I was younger, I remember reading about that, but then years later, finding myself in the forest doing research and meeting up with Brenda Butler, who was the original investigator and the co-author with Jenny Randles to Sky Crasher Cosmic Conspiracy, which was released and published by Neville Spearman in 1984. And I met Brenda in the forest, didn't know where she was in the world. And we combined this book together. We wrote this book, which was more in line with UFOs seen before and after Rendlesham, but people got the whole thing wrong. They thought the whole book was about the 1980 event. So Philip Mantle, British royalty here in terms of UFO research, a very dear friend and, a lovely man. He has his own flying disc press, and he is re-releasing Sky Crash throughout time, and we have given it a different title, a subtitle this time, so that people aren't so confused with the fact that it's all about the 1980 event. But I will tell you something else very quickly here. When I had found a publisher years ago here in England, my first book, of all things, although I was interested in UFO research before I got involved with the psychic exploration, my first book to be published was Reaching for the Divine, which was about the exploration of consciousness and the possibility of life after death, or survival beyond this realm. And the next book that I wrote was called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena, which Capelban Publishing here in England published, I think, in 2000 and, was it 9 or 8? I can't remember anyways. Anyway, so when the John Day, he's passed over now, a good man, lovely man. You remind me, Matt, a little bit of him because you look a little bit like John Day. You look like him. Anyway, he was a good man.
He could talk. Ugly?
No, he was a good man. Anyway, he said, I'll publish your UFO book. I'll publish it. But I have to retract something in there. And I'm like, oh God. So he said, the bit about the investigative medical procedure that you had through your abduction has to come out. Otherwise, I can't publish the book. And I'm like, okay, you don't say no to a publisher because finding one is really hard even back then. But what people didn't realize, or some did, was that my experience that I had back in 1989 had been published in another magazine, and a whole lot in there. So I'm like, well, why would, and I thought, well, why would they retract that? But there again, because
copyright.
But also because on board that craft that I was on, and I'm embarrassed to say this, there were 3 reptilians. And of course, John Day was saying, Philip, we understand about the greys, but there is no connection to the reptilians. We can't have it in there. Now, isn't that interesting? Yeah? Don't you find that interesting?
Curious. Now, the reason why I asked about your twin brother is, like I said, I've been introduced to other people on board craft and then met up later. One of the pair I met up with later were the Starborn twins. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Audrey and Debbie Starborn.
Oh, they wrote a book. They wrote a book.
They're in a process, or they're in plenty of other people's books, but they're twins that came from basically my area, and we got introduced, and when we were younger, and then later on, I was working at a location, and they both walked in, and we both went, "Hey!" Now this is after I had already just dealt with another case where I met my first wife on board, and then we ran into each other. Yeah, I seem to run into a lot of people on board, and then
you do hear this. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Well, that's what I was working with Bud Hopkins on. Is people
wow,
that
yeah.
run into each other, and that because that was like I found that extremely fascinating because it takes it out of what I call the psychobabble baloney stuff that it's all in your head stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you another thing as well too. Is Terry Lovelace, district attorney, a good friend, lovely man. I mean, his book, Instance at Devil's Den, scared,
Yeah.
excuse my French, the crap out of me. And, and talking to Terry and building up the rapport, he is a brilliant, wonderful man. And of course, all of us, it gives me the shivers thinking about these levels of high strangeness. Matt, of you saying that you're familiar with people that you had met. And I remembered the series, the television series. I'm a sucker for films. I buy them all on DVD for years and years. But one of them that was done.
Don't tell me Taken.
Yes, that's right. I was just going to say
Charlie.
Taken.
I'm Charlie. No,
yeah.
quite literally, they based it on me.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that film because in that film, Charlie, stroke Matt, as you know, the producer Steven Spielberg, I believe, was the one who produced
got the material from Bud Hopkins.
That's right.
Yes,
exactly. And I was going to say that you see this integration, this incredible integration of these very high-powered individuals who did start from nothing and work their way up, and they're probably very down to earth and very understanding as we are. But isn't it fascinating how you start to find that there are connections between not only people but events also, of how it leads you to a particular place? So my argument also is that on a conscious or soul level, and I know that people will say, what do you mean conscious or soul? Because, well, my idea is that if we survive death, consciousness, the part of what you are, survives that process of separation. This consciousness obviously is multidimensional, multifaceted. And there is also the suggestion that perhaps, on soul groups, we think that we are human, that this is all that we represent, that we're a human being. But it is quite conceivable to assume that consciousness could transmute to other areas beyond this plane of reality, and that we ourselves have been part of that consciousness and still are. And those intelligences are coming back to see how we fare within this biological unit. You see, there are so many areas that we could consider. And I think it's wonderful that you take each one and you analyze each one and you say, okay, that's a possibility. There are some things that are a little bit too far in terms of, some people claim all sorts of incredible things. But I think by analyzing and studying all that we have and that we're still looking at tells us that there are certain patterns, and these patterns indicate that we are dealing with a real phenomena. It could operate in our physical universe, but a lot of the data is assuming that we're dealing with something that operates beyond our level of reality, and that this is interesting and I think fascinating for all of us, not just on a scientific level investigations, but also on a theoretical level, because it gives us hope. Gentlemen, it gives us hope because it tells us all that we are much more than just a meat machine with a sell-by date. And my God, I can tell you, when I get to the other side, when I get there, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to get a refund. You put me down on that planet, you keep me as far away from Earth as possible, because I ain't going back down there again.
So let me put it to you this way then. Is abductions looking to extend our warranty?
You never know. Maybe.
Well, you don't know. And also, it could be that, seriously, that the human experiment through my eyes is not, who am I to say, but is not perfection. And it could be possible that there is some integration of genetics which is trying to create a mechanism or a body that is able to survive much longer. Because if you look at our genesis, it does indicate to me that we were created by some advanced beings. I don't subscribe to the God hypothesis, or I believe in a higher being, a consciousness that we're all connected to, that people call God. But it appears to me that we have gone through a lot of trials and errors, and I don't think that the human experiment has gone according to the way that it's meant to. I mean, look at us. I mean, we are brilliant, we're amazing, and I'm not talking for all of us, but there are many people who are just, you don't want to know. And it's like, if that represents the human species, then I'm ashamed to be part of that. It doesn't make me any better than them. It's just that you're trying to view your reality and balance that reality through goodness and curiosity and investigation and advancement. Some people don't want that. So I think that on a level of species, it is highly possible to assume that another intelligence, or it could be very much the same intelligence, is coming back to remodify or restructure kindly a new genus, a new evolving of humanity, as it were, but somewhere beyond this level of reality. So, I'm people, unfortunately, when you have an opinion, you get shot down and someone has all the answers. I don't have any answers. I have ideas like everyone else, and I have theoretical content, which I love.
Right.
I love this. I love the scientific part of it. As I said, I'm no scientist, but I embrace and I try to understand those levels of integration that is so important and essential to finding out what we're dealing with. But as we come full circle, we know we've been lied to by the system. So,
Right.
it just is like, what is going on? I mean, I think I have an idea, but as I said, these people, where do they get off? Who do they think they are? Masters of the universe? They surely must know there are researchers and good scientists out there who want to know, that are yearning to know, that they can even assist in the developing research. Because if we were allowed in and they showed us what they had, we could work with them to say, okay, what about this or what about that? Or if you're finding it difficult to communicate with them, what about this, doing it this way? You see, I just, I think there's a few elect people on this planet who want it all for themselves and only for themselves. They don't want to share that, but they know that the phenomena is, they can't control it. And this is why they've created this barrage of ridicule within the media circuits to try and deflect and, oh, you don't want to look at that, it's all airy fairy stuff. But and then use the word
control it. Exactly. They can't control that narrative.
Exactly.
What they're looking for is they're looking for the things they can exploit, like the nuts and bolts things that they
correct.
Can,
right. Exactly.
Correct.
Or whatever they want. They can't
Correct.
control the narrative of humanity itself. In humanity, if you look at their report, is a work in progress. That's what
Well, the narrative's out of the box now. It just
Absolutely.
you can't put it back in. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So they've got
property of Pandora.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the other really sad thing about this is that, unfortunately, we all want a piece of the pie. We're all looking for the truth. Unfortunately, there are some people who want all the fame to go with it as well. They want to be the person who opens up the holy grail to all of this. But no one has exclusive rights to the phenomena. That's why I've always worked in tandem with other researchers. And, although we have our own separate lives, we do our own separate thinking, we pool together our resources and we talk about things. We discuss them much just like we're doing here. Right. And, I, as I said before, I don't have the answers. But what we do have is theoretical content, and that is something that I'm working on in certain other books and projects at the moment, to look at other possibilities, most notably the abduction phenomena, which is fascinating. And I have to say, Matt, it's interesting when you said that you were very honored to work with Bud Hopkins. I never met the man. I never spoke to the man, because when I had my experience back in 1989, I knew no one that was connected with this. And it took many years to build up the courage to come forward, to come out with it, and then to start to, develop as a writer and a researcher in analyzing this. I wasn't very happy with a lot of the content material that was being administered into the publications or media machine. A lot of it was designed to make money, and most of it still today is there as a fantasy fantasy basis generated to create sales and shock factor. But hopefully we're all level-headed and we keep ourselves grounded. But what we are finding is something that is so incredible, so amazing that, I think it would put our science to shame. I think we're all wanting to open up to that reality, to understand it, to embrace it, to let it envelope us so that we have a deeper understanding of not just it, but us as well, what we are part of. And damn the system we serve, because all it's ever done is lied and covered and even killed some people, researchers. They have been killed. We know that as fact. Silenced because they've got too close to the truth, or they've been changing public opinion.
They broke into my house, stole my research, tried to set my house on fire, and then threatened me at gunpoint. So yeah.
Oh my goodness! Well,
yeah.
Well, I haven't had any of that. That happened to me, and it just goes to show what level I'm at the moment. But I think they just leave me alone. I think they probably think I'm crazy anyway.
I've actually had interference during live streams. I've had interference on my phones. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, no, I had someone taking down stuff about the greys and the cloning issue and consciousness and the theoretical model that I was talking about, and continuously doing that. And then they were taking down some programs that I was on. And I thought, well, there's nothing special about myself. I'm just interested like everyone else. And, maybe it's because of the people you're linked with. And, we don't know. And I know that we went the old landlines used to be bugged years ago, talking to an ex-CID member of a friend, talking about UFOs and stuff like that. And we were being monitored. And I've had some really crazy calls coming through, and a few, if I use the word, very colorful people, connecting with me. And I'm like, no, I don't think I like you. I don't want to. I'm not being nasty or anything, but you get a very nasty feeling with some people. But as I said, I think it's incredible that we come together and discuss. One of the things I will tell you. And another area that's interesting is that this level of high strangeness, you mentioned Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, and one of the areas we'd all love to go there, but I think we might be damn scared if you get some effects that have happened to some of the scientific team that's there at the moment, with Brandon Frugal and his team. But again, they've got some pretty good scientists there, haven't they? And they're trying to work out what it is. But it continuously eludes them again. It's like chasing shadows. And this whole thing about the beings and, of course, livestock, that there's a physical part and a non-physical part. They seem to go hand in claw with one another. And this is what fascinates me. And if we think about it, there are two components to us as well: physical and non-physical, energy and biological matter. And the same with the earth.
Energy.
Yes. And so this intelligence must know how to manipulate that energy while it still comes in on a kind of physical level of integration. So this is certainly areas that I'm looking into and trying to get my head around in terms of research. It is a laborious task. But sometimes rewarding. You can't make everyone happy when you write something or you bring something out. Unfortunately, you'll have your enemies. But I'm told that if you have enemies, then you seem to be getting somewhere.
Yeah, I've been told that too. Yep, that's the only time when you're being taken serious. Yep. Yeah. I would suggest one thing, Philip, that you should keep in contact with Matt in regards to your research concerning what you just said.
And let me offer something to you. I'm one of the board members of a thing over here in America called Experiencers Speak and Experiencers Meet. we're an abductee support group. We started it. We have literally hundreds of members across the United States.
Wow. And what I can do is I can send you my email privately as well. Can I send that to you, Tim, to send to Matt
and I'll give it to
privately?
Matt. Sure.
And vice versa.
And I know life happens, so I will that would be very interesting because I know that we all have our own lives and we've got our own work, and time sometimes is very precious. But I'd be very honored to be connected and linked with that. But one of the things that we're all after, gentlemen, yourselves included, is the truth, and it reminds me a little bit of the ending of Cocoon, the film. Now, David Saperstein is another dear friend of mine and my brother's. We knew him when his first book came out. They made it into a feature film, Cocoon, in 1985. The ending of that book, although David wrote Cocoon, Metamorphosis, and Butterfly, the aliens were very different in his book to the ones that were represented on the screen. But the ending, his aliens were good aliens. They were good people. And they were exploring dark matter, he mentioned even in his second book, Metamorphosis. But one of the things I loved at the end was the part of Ascension. And I have to say here that the soundtrack that was created for that was absolutely incredible. The soundtrack, the part called Ascension. And one of the things I loved about it was that I always wanted to believe that all of us were being ascended upwards. Now, I'm not using a spiritual part here. I'm just saying it's a romantic idea of our souls elevating upwards. And I always wanted to believe that the aliens were good aliens, that they, you could meet them and talk to them like you have, Matt. I haven't had the pleasure of that yet. And I say yet, there is hope still. But I think that the way that we're seeing this, there is another aspect to this, which is disturbing within its content to a degree, or at least through our human perception is disturbing. Maybe they have their own agenda, and maybe it's because they don't trust us. And that's the reason why they keep themselves at arm's length. That is a possibility. But they can read our minds, right? They could see what we are inside. So, you've got a good person or a bad person.
Right.
Well, blank pages are the easiest to read.
Okay, one thing I want to say to you, Philip, is congratulations on your award.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
From Omni magazine, right?
Out of Limits magazine, the Outer Limits magazine.
Out of Limits, that's right.
Outer Limits magazine.
There it is.
I was very honored. I was very honored. And I think, I never expected anything, but I think that in search of the truth, I was very honored. Chris Evers, who created OLM, Out of Limits magazine, he gives out 2 awards a year. He did spread it by giving out 3 this year. But of course, he said there was you and your twin brother. My brother does all of the artwork for a lot of the work of the UFO magazines and material, excuse me, digital artwork. He's an artist as well, but he's also a researcher. But I mean, I spent years, battling for the truth. And there were some times where I was brought to my knees and very broken because, we're after the truth, but some people weren't truthful or honest. And that hurt. But I picked myself up and I kept myself going. And I was very, very honored to receive that award. It was very touching. Indeed. I mean, we're all important, and right. Every one of us are part of this. It's not because you've got an award that makes you a special person, but right. I can assure you that it touched my heart. And I think on a very personal level, it gave me for myself inspiration to keep searching for that truth and dealing with integrity. We sometimes make mistakes with people. That will happen, led down the garden path, but we pick ourselves back up. And one person said to me, "Where do you get your ideas from? Where do you get them?" And I said, "Well, don't you know?" I said, "From other people. I read other people's research." And then, of course, what happens is that, as we do with all UFO and paranormal related phenomena, we're on the same page. But at that point, you then develop your own theories or models around what you think or feel is happening, because you can't start with a blank canvas. If we didn't know anything about UFOs, how on earth would we be able to study them? We have to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have to look at all elements of it, not just one faction of it. We must look at the whole in order to understand the parts. At least that's the way I see it, do you understand? But we still have a blank page, but we're working on that.
Yes, we are. I do want to share with people in the chat this, your radio show on Paranormal UK Radio Network. Yeah. Is that still going on?
Yeah. We bring out a program once every month. I couldn't do it every week because it's too much. We get researchers on, authors on, experiencers on, paranormal investigators, UFO investigators, you name it, cryptozoologists. And what we do is that we allow them to discuss about themselves, pretty much like your program is here. It is audio only. And we've been doing that for about, is it 3 or 4 years now? We were offered to do it for the Paranormal UK Radio Network, which is here in England, but they're worldwide, like yourselves. And we were very honored to be given that. It only happened because we were on a show, and the lady said, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, who's in America, said, you'd make a great guest, oh my God, you'll be great, and I said, oh, really? And they said, well, Ronnie declined to begin with, and then they sort of like said, no, do it. So that's what we've been doing. And it's good because it's lovely to hear other people's opinions and see what they've discovered, what they've found. It's wonderful. So, as I said, I never put myself in a corner. I'm always open to all forms of debate. And that is what's interesting about this whole subject matter. And thank you, Matt. I have this. I'm frightened that I may lose this when we come out.
Take a screenshot.
I'll do more than that. I'm just going to copy it. Well, there we are. And is this chat on everyone's? Will everyone see this?
No, this is a private chat.
Right. Let me just put this for you, Matt. Okay. If I give you, people will see me typing on here. Let's say,
well, we're not there we are. So it's fine.
That's my email. So Matt, take my email address. That's my email address. That is where you can get hold of me. On there, and I've got yours, but I've copied that. And what I'll do is I'll have to. I've copied that, so I'll put that in my file afterwards. Yeah.
I was going to tell you real quick, Philip. I'm good friends with Kathleen Martin and Terry Lovelace. Terry Lovelace is a very good friend of mine. He comes on the channel a lot as a guest co-host. He is definitely vetted as a legitimate abduction.
Absolutely and totally.
I have seen his implants. It's just amazing.
Wow. And I think this is the other thing as well. This brings us all together as friends and family within UFO community. And when we have these conferences or these get-togethers, it's like meeting up with a family. I say that just because you're doing a talk doesn't make you any more important. It's more about the comradeship and the sharing and the universal understanding that we're all there for the same reason. And I think that is really beautiful with everything that we do with regards to that. So it's been a lovely journey. It's been harsh sometimes and difficult, especially when you're banging your head against the wall trying to work this or that out or trying to understand it. But I think that it's wonderful that we all come together to talk about our own ideas and throw them out there and kind of like, and see what happens.
One thing I want to say is you're more than welcome to come back on our channel anytime.
Thank you very much. And I would love to maybe late next year, hopefully. I mean, I will have Sky Crash re-released in December of this year, but late next year, hopefully, I will have a new book about the abduction hypothesis on the alien, the Greys, and see how that goes. And
Okay.
then, of course, I'm working on 2 other projects as well. So I'm kind of like trying to space myself between one and the other 2, because whereas years before I'd find it difficult to find a publisher, now they're knocking on your door. It's like, oh my God, it's a really lovely, wonderful feeling. And I'm
Right.
very blessed and very honored by it. Yes. So.
Isn't your latest book this one here?
Yes, You the Public Deceived, the Grand UFO Deception, and Philip Mantle brought that out some while ago now. But it also gives a connection with famous cases and not so famous, and also some theoretical ideas surrounding the abduction and UFO subject matter. Yeah.
Okay, I just have to say to everyone that this is available on Amazon. All his books are on Amazon. Just look up Philip Kinsella, and you will find tons of literary works that are well worth the read. I want to thank you, Philip, for coming here tonight and talking to us.
Well, Matt and Tim, it's been an absolute honor. Thank you very much indeed. I always worry and hope that the talks go well, and if I do get my words sometimes mixed around the wrong way. I had a stroke many, many years ago, and sometimes I still get my words mixed up. But we get there. We get there. We find our way through that little bit there. So
You are very well spoken, sir. Very well
thank you.
spoken.
Thank you.
Matt, any last comments?
Yeah, I would love to have you back on again if Tim lets me co-host with you. And
Oh, yeah.
and I also do a radio show over. I've been doing one for the past 16, 17 years here in the States. I would like to hit you up. We do it live on a Saturday night. I'll have to organize time with you, but yeah. Any plans to come here to the States?
Well, on 2 occasions, we were meant to come to the Laughlin UFO conference, me and my brother, and another one. But unfortunately, because of the current situation with
travel,
and also the COVID situation, we were not able to come over because of the restrictions. But we are hoping to come next year and see what happens. And so there is always hope. But we are hoping to get over to the States anyway because of some other personal issues with regards to UFO research, and for my own personal interest. We shall see what develops from that. But yes.
Well, it's sad to say that you're going to miss the 75th anniversary of the Roswell crash over the July 4th weekend this year.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, you enjoy yourselves, gentlemen. And, if you see the Greys, if they come down, tell them that I would also like a word with them.
Okay.
Will do.
One other question for you. Is there any place that our viewers can go see you over in England that you may be having coming up? Are you going to be talking at any events over there?
Well, there are some television programs that are due out fairly soon, and one of them's just been completed, and the other one is from EM Productions here in England, and it's called the Interdimensional Connection. You can see the promotion to that on YouTube by you just type in the Interdimensional Connection and by EM Productions. And that features my brother, myself, and Paul Asco. And there was another documentary that's coming out fairly soon with a very large channel. I'm not doing any talks the rest of this year, but I am working and focusing on the books. And you can get hold of me on our website, www.thekinsellatwins.com. So www.thekinsellatwins.com, and that's got a load of stuff on there as well, or on the normal channels. We're all important. We're all on there. When you're digging away at the truth, you'll find me stuck in there somewhere.
Well, thank you very much, Philip, for coming and sharing your gracious amount of time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Matt and Tim. Thank you.
Good night, Philip.
Good night. God bless. Thank you.
Okay, so that's our interview for this evening in regards to Philip Kinsella. We hope you really enjoyed it. He was very articulate, and we actually got a lot of information out of him. What did you think, Matt?
I found him very fascinating. His body of work in terms of books are quite prolific. People should go look him up. Go look up his books. I would love to, sit down and speak with him again for another couple of hours. Very, very intelligent, articulate man.
We plan to do an interview in the future where he is live so that you can ask him questions directly. That way, it's not pre recorded and you don't have to just watch it. Um, but he has promised to come back on. We just have to arrange the correct time. It might be during the afternoon rather than at night. So we'll let you know and keep you informed. I want to thank everybody in the chat room for participating this evening, and I want to thank everyone who watched online as well. And from Matt and myself, we want to say good night and good evening.